The Kytherian Empire had conquered 47 star systems across the galaxy's outer rim, each victory adding another jewel to their vast crown of dominion. Their military doctrine was precise, overwhelming, and had never failed them. When their long-range scouts detected the small blue planet in the Sol system, Admiral Zexhai felt confident this would be conquest number 48. The planet's inhabitants called it Earth, and from orbital scans, it appeared to be a relatively primitive world. The beings there had barely achieved faster-than-light communication, let alone travel. Their military forces wore distinctive uniforms, carried crude projectile weapons, and organized themselves in predictable hierarchical structures that the Kytherian War computers could easily analyze and counter. Standard subjugation protocol. Admiral Zexhai commanded from the bridge of the flagship Dominance. Deploy the Third Fleet to strategic positions around their major population centers. Broadcast surrender terms in their primitive languages. If they refuse, we demonstrate our superiority with targeted strikes on their military installations. The Admiral's four arms moved gracefully across the command interface, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the bridge's blue lighting. Around him, his crew of insectoid warriors prepared for what they assumed would be another routine planetary acquisition. The Empire's standard tactics had worked flawlessly for over 2 centuries. There was no reason to expect anything different from these soft-skinned bipeds. The initial scans had shown Earth's military to be laughably primitive by Kytherian standards. Their soldiers wore bright uniforms that made them easily identifiable. Their weapons required chemical propellants, and their vehicles moved on crude wheels or simple repulsors. Most amusing of all, they seemed to operate under strict codes of conduct that limited their actions even during warfare. Captain Vorth, the fleet's intelligence officer, approached the Admiral with a datapad clutched in his secondary arms. "Sir, we've completed our analysis of their military capabilities. Their technology is approximately 400 years behind our current standards. Their largest explosive devices are fusion-based, and their fastest aircraft cannot exceed 3 times the speed of sound." Admiral Zexhai's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "Excellent. What about their command structure?" "Highly organized and predictable, sir. Clear chains of command, formal ranks, standardized equipment. They even announced their military operations through public communication channels. We should have complete tactical superiority within the first engagement." The Admiral studied the holographic display showing Earth's continents. Major cities pulsed with heat signatures, while military bases showed up as organized geometric patterns. Everything looked exactly as their xenobiologists had predicted, a young species, barely out of its planetary infancy, following all the standard patterns of military development. "Begin the approach," Zexhai ordered. "Position assault groups over their capitals. We'll start with their largest population center, the area they call New York. A demonstration of force there should convince their leaders to surrender without unnecessary bloodshed." The Kytherian fleet moved with practiced precision. Hundreds of sleek, dark vessels descended through Earth's atmosphere, their arrival announced by the thunderous sonic booms that shattered windows across the globe. The ships took positions over major cities, their weapons trained on military installations and government buildings. Within hours, contact was established. The humans' primitive communication systems crackled with desperate messages in dozens of languages. Translation protocols quickly identified the dominant tongues, and soon Admiral Zexhai found himself addressing the United Nations Security Council. "Inhabitants of Earth," his voice boomed across every electronic device on the planet. "I am Admiral Zexhai of the Kytherian Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our domain. Surrender your military forces and submit to our authority, and your species will be granted the privilege of serving the Empire. Resist, and we will demonstrate why 47 worlds have chosen submission over destruction." The response came faster than expected. A gray-haired human male appeared on the communication channel, flanked by others wearing formal attire. "I am Secretary General Martinez of the United Nations. We request 24 hours to consider your terms and coordinate our response." Admiral Zexhai's mandibles clicked in amusement. "You have 6 hours. Any military action taken during this period will be considered an act of aggression and met with immediate retaliation." As the communication ended, Captain Vorth approached with an updated intelligence report. Sir, their military forces appear to be mobilizing. Tank columns are moving toward major cities, aircraft are being scrambled, and their naval vessels are taking defensive positions. Predictable, Zexhai replied. They're preparing for a conventional defense. Their military doctrine is even more primitive than we thought. Continue monitoring their movements. When the deadline expires, we'll neutralize their most visible assets first. What the Admiral and his intelligence officer failed to notice were the thousands of unremarkable humans going about their daily routines. In coffee shops and grocery stores, mechanics and teachers, plumbers and accountants continued their normal activities. The orbital scanners focused on obvious military targets: the uniformed soldiers, the marked vehicles, the identified command centers. They missed the middle-aged woman loading groceries into her sedan. They overlooked the young man jogging through Central Park. They didn't pay attention to the elderly gentleman feeding pigeons on a bench, or the construction worker operating a crane near downtown Seattle. Sarah Chin finished loading her groceries and drove home to her suburban house, where she kissed her husband and helped her 8-year-old daughter with homework. After dinner, she went down to the basement and opened a concealed panel behind the water heater. Inside was equipment that the Kytherian scanners would have recognized as far more advanced than anything they detected in Earth's military arsenals. Marcus Johnson completed his morning run and returned to his apartment, where he showered and dressed for his job at an accounting firm. Before leaving, he sent a text message that looked like a mundane reminder about lunch plans. 300 miles away, Dr. Elizabeth Warren received the message and understood that it was time to activate protocols that had been in place for decades. Around the world, similar scenes played out. The woman walking her dog in London, the taxi driver in Mumbai, the street musician in Sao Paulo, all of them received messages. All of them began making quiet preparations. The Kytherian Empire had made the same mistake that countless invaders throughout human history had made. They had looked for the obvious threats, the visible military, the uniformed soldiers. They had never considered that Earth's most dangerous defenders might be hiding in plain sight. As the 6-hour deadline approached, Admiral Zexhai reviewed the tactical displays one final time. Human military forces had positioned themselves exactly as predicted: tanks and artillery outside major cities, aircraft at known bases, naval vessels in defensive formations. It would be a straightforward engagement. Sir, Captain Vorth reported, human military communications are increasing. They appear to be coordinating a defensive strategy. Of course they are, Zexhai replied. Begin the demonstration. Target their tank columns outside New York. Precision strikes only. We want to show them the futility of resistance without causing unnecessary destruction. The Kytherian attack began with calculated precision. Energy beams lanced down from the sky, vaporizing human tanks and aircraft with surgical accuracy. Within minutes, Earth's visible military presence was reduced by 30%. The message was clear: resistance was futile. Admiral Zexhai waited for the inevitable surrender transmission. In every previous conquest, this demonstration had been enough. Military leaders would contact their political superiors, casualties would be counted, and surrender terms would be negotiated within the hour. The communication channel activated, and Secretary General Martinez appeared again. His expression was grim but resolute. Admiral Zexhai, we have considered your terms. Our answer is no. Earth will not surrender. Zexhai's mandibles clicked in irritation. Very well. You have chosen destruction over wisdom. We will now begin systematic targeting of your population centers. Perhaps the loss of a few million civilians will change your perspective. But, as the Kytherian ships moved into position for the next phase of their attack, something unprecedented happened. The orbital scanners began detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist on this primitive world. Weapon systems that had somehow remained hidden were powering up across the planet's surface. Sir, Captain Vorth's voice carried a note of alarm. We're reading massive power spikes from the surface. These signatures, they're not possible. According to our scans, these humans don't have this level of technology. Admiral Zexhai studied the displays with growing confusion. The energy readings were appearing everywhere, not just from military installations, but from civilian areas. Suburbs, office buildings, shopping centers, even remote farmhouses were showing weapon signatures that rivaled their own technology. "Recalibrate the sensors," he ordered. "There must be some kind of interference." But the readings were accurate. Across Earth's surface, ordinary-looking buildings were opening hidden panels to reveal weapon systems that had never appeared on any scan. The grocery store where Sarah Chun worked part-time housed a particle beam cannon. The accounting firm where Marcus Johnson spent his days was built over a missile silo containing warheads with yield capacities that made Kytherian nuclear weapons look primitive. The street musician in Sao Paulo set down his guitar and activated a personal energy shield that could deflect anything in the Kytherian arsenal. The taxi driver in Mumbai opened his trunk to reveal a portable fusion reactor and a weapon that could punch holes through battleship hulls. The elderly man feeding pigeons stood up, stretched, and began calling coordinates to orbital defense platforms that had somehow remained completely invisible until this moment. "Sir," Vortha's voice was barely controlled panic now. "We're reading over 50,000 individual weapon signatures. The entire planet appears to be armed." Admiral Zexhai stared at the impossible displays. In 2 centuries of conquest, nothing like this had ever happened. How had an apparently primitive world hidden such massive military capabilities? How had their sensors failed to detect any of this? The answer came in the form of a new communication from the planet's surface. But this time, it wasn't Secretary General Martinez. The human who appeared on screen was the same woman who had been loading groceries into her car just hours earlier. "Admiral Zexhai," Sarah Chun said, her voice calm and professional. "This is Colonel Chun of Earth Defense Command. I think it's time we had a proper conversation about what you've gotten yourself into." Zexhai's 4 arms trembled as he stared at the woman who had somehow fooled every scanner in his fleet. "Impossible. You're civilians. Our sensors show no military training, no advanced technology." Sarah's expression didn't change. "Your sensors show exactly what we wanted them to show. Earth has been preparing for this day for a very long time. We knew eventually someone would come looking for an easy conquest. We've been waiting for you." Around the world, the masquerade was dropping. Soccer moms were climbing into power armor. Accountants were manning fusion cannons. Retirees were coordinating orbital strikes. The entire planet had somehow been concealed beneath a veneer of normalcy that the Kytherian Empire had never learned to see through. "This is impossible," Admiral Zexhai repeated, but the evidence was mounting on every display around him. "Our intelligence was perfect. You have a primitive military structure, basic technology." "We have exactly the military structure we chose to show you," Sarah replied. "And our technology is considerably more advanced than you realize. The question now is whether you're going to leave peacefully or whether we're going to have to demonstrate why 47 worlds might have made a mistake trusting your empire's protection." For the first time in his military career, Admiral Zexhai found himself facing an unknown enemy. Everything his empire had learned about warfare, every tactical doctrine they had developed, was based on the assumption that military threats would be visible and identifiable. The concept of an entire planet disguising itself as a primitive civilization had never occurred to any Kytherian strategist. Captain Vorth approached with yet another impossible reading. "Sir, we're detecting movement in the asteroid belt. Objects that we classified as space debris are changing course. They appear to be some kind of spacecraft." On the main display, dots that had been marked as natural asteroids were indeed moving with purpose, taking up positions around the Kytherian fleet. How many ships did these humans have hidden throughout their system? How long had they been watching and preparing? Admiral Zexhai realized that for the first time in Kytherian history, they had encountered an enemy who understood the art of war better than they did. The Empire had grown complacent, relying on superior technology and overwhelming force. They had never learned to fight an enemy who had been preparing specifically to face them. The Admiral's mandibles clicked nervously as he contemplated his options. Retreat would mean admitting failure, something that could end his career and disgrace his family line. But advancing into this trap could mean losing the entire Third Fleet. "Colonel Chun," he said finally, "perhaps we should discuss terms." Sarah's smile was not entirely pleasant. "I'm afraid it's a bit late for negotiations, Admiral. You attacked our world. You destroyed our equipment and killed our people. Now it's time for you to learn what happens when you underestimate Earth's children. Admiral HFY had commanded fleets through dozens of planetary conquests, but he had never experienced anything like the systematic dismantling of his tactical advantages that began within minutes of Colonel Chin's transmission. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were demonstrating a level of strategic coordination that suggested decades of preparation specifically for this moment. The first indication of how thoroughly the Empire had been deceived came from the asteroid belt. Captain Vorth's sensors had identified over 200 objects moving with deliberate purpose toward the Kytherian fleet. What they had assumed were mining operations or natural phenomena were revealing themselves as heavily armed spacecraft that had been waiting in dark orbits for exactly this scenario. "Sir, the approaching vessels are broadcasting identification codes," Vorth reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "Earth Defense Force, 7th Fleet. They're requesting our surrender." HFY's four arms moved frantically across his command interface, trying to make sense of the tactical display. How had an apparently primitive civilization hidden an entire fleet in their outer system? The energy signatures these ships were producing suggested technology that surpassed even the Empire's latest designs. That's impossible. Our deep space sensors mapped this entire system. There were no signs of advanced civilization beyond the third planet. "With respect, sir," came a new voice over the communication channel. "Your sensors saw exactly what we wanted them to see." The speaker was a human male who appeared to be middle-aged, wearing what looked like casual civilian clothing. Behind him, Admiral HFY could see what was obviously a sophisticated command center, filled with displays and interfaces that looked disturbingly familiar to Kytherian technology. "I'm Admiral Harrison, commanding the Sol Defense Network. We've been monitoring your approach for several months. Your fleet's tactical capabilities have been thoroughly analyzed and cataloged. We know the exact specifications of every ship in your task force, the capabilities of every weapon system, and the standard operational procedures for your military doctrine." HFY felt something he had never experienced in over a century of military service. Genuine fear. "Months? That's impossible. We only detected your world 6 days ago." Admiral Harrison's expression was patient, almost sympathetic. "Admiral, with respect, you detected what we allowed you to detect. Earth has been aware of the Kytherian Empire for quite some time. We've been preparing for this encounter long before you ever set course for our system." The implications of this statement hit HFY like a physical blow. If these humans had known about the Empire, had been preparing specifically for them, then everything about this invasion had been anticipated. Every tactical decision, every strategic choice, had potentially been accounted for in advance. "Status report," HFY barked at his tactical officer. "Sir, we're surrounded. The human vessels have taken positions at optimal firing angles. They're maintaining distance outside our effective weapons range, but their energy signatures suggest they could engage us from current positions." Also, the officer hesitated. "Report. Sir, we're detecting similar energy buildups on the planet's surface. It appears that every major population center has been fortified beyond anything our intelligence indicated was possible." On the main display, Earth itself was transforming before their eyes. Buildings that had appeared normal on all scans were revealing hidden weapon emplacements. The orbital elevators they had dismissed as primitive transportation infrastructure were powering up defensive systems that rivaled the Empire's most advanced space stations. Marcus Johnson sat in his accounting office, but the mild-mannered appearance was gone. His desk had been pushed aside to reveal a tactical display that showed the positions of every Kytherian ship in real time. Around him, his co-workers were coordinating targeting solutions with orbital defense platforms that had somehow remained completely invisible to the Empire's sensors. "Integration Command, this is Sector 7. Marcus spoke into a headset that definitely wasn't standard office equipment. "We have firing solutions on targets 12 through 18. Awaiting your authorization." 3,000 miles away, Sarah Chun was no longer pretending to be a suburban housewife. The basement of her home had been revealed as an advanced command bunker, complete with direct links to military satellites and weapon systems that spanned the entire planet. "All sectors, this is Ground Command Alpha." She spoke into a communication array that connected her with similar hidden facilities across the globe. "Enemy fleet is in optimal position. Begin Phase 2 of Revelation Protocol. What happened next would have been impossible if the Kytherians had truly understood what they were facing. Across Earth's surface, the carefully maintained illusion of primitive civilization simply vanished. Shopping malls opened their roofs to reveal missile batteries. Office buildings extended weapon platforms that had been hidden within their normal architectural features. Even residential neighborhoods revealed that many of the houses were actually sophisticated military installations. The elderly man who had been feeding pigeons stood up and walked to what appeared to be a normal park bench. When he placed his hand on a specific section, the bench split open to reveal a control interface that connected him directly to a network of orbital defense satellites. "Control, this is Ground Station Charlie," he said, his voice carrying decades of military authority. "Requesting permission to demonstrate our point defense capabilities." Admiral Harrison's voice came through every Kytherian ship simultaneously. "Admiral HFY, I'm going to offer you a demonstration of why attacking Earth was a poor tactical decision. Please observe your sensor displays." Across the planet's surface, thousands of previously undetected installations suddenly became visible to the Kytherian sensors. Not just military bases, but an integrated defense network that turned the entire world into a fortress. Every major city was revealed to be a military stronghold. Every transportation hub was actually a weapons platform. Even the communication satellites they had been monitoring were armed with defensive systems. "This is impossible," Captain Vorth whispered, staring at the displays. "Sir, according to these readings, their defensive capabilities exceed our own by several orders of magnitude. How do we miss all of this?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, who had been working as a university professor until that morning, appeared on the communication channel. Behind her was what was obviously a research laboratory filled with technology that looked suspiciously familiar to Kytherian designs. "The Empire has been very consistent in their approach to conquest," she explained, her tone academic but firm. "You rely on technological superiority and the element of surprise. You scout target worlds looking for obvious military threats, then overwhelm them with superior firepower. It's worked for you 47 times because you've never encountered a civilization that understood your methods well enough to counter them." Admiral HFY realized that his worst fears were being confirmed. These humans hadn't just been lucky or resourceful. They had specifically studied the Empire's military doctrine and developed countermeasures designed to exploit their tactical assumptions. "You've been watching us," he said, the statement hanging somewhere between question and accusation. "For quite a while," Dr. Warren confirmed. "Earth has had deep space observation capabilities far beyond what your scans detected. We've been monitoring the Empire's expansion across the outer rim, studying your methods, analyzing your technology. We knew eventually you would reach Seoul, and we've been preparing for that day." The taxi driver in Mumbai had abandoned his vehicle and was now coordinating strike missions from what appeared to be a mobile command center that had somehow been disguised as an ordinary car. The street musician in Sao Paulo was calling in orbital bombardment coordinates to platforms that had been masquerading as communication satellites. "Sir," the Kytherian tactical officer reported, his voice barely controlled, "we're reading massive power buildups throughout the system. Not just from the planet, but from installations we never detected on their moon, in the asteroid belt, even on the outer planets." Admiral HFY studied the impossible displays surrounding him. Humanity had not just hidden military capabilities on their home world. They had turned their entire star system into an elaborate trap. The Empire's fleet was not just outnumbered. They were completely surrounded by an enemy that had been expecting them for months or possibly years. "Admiral Harrison," HFY said finally, "what do you want?" The human admiral's expression remained professional but implacable. "First, your immediate withdrawal from our system. Second, a full accounting of your invasion plans and intelligence regarding the Empire's expansion policies. Third, reparations for the damage you've already caused to our people and property." "And if we refuse?" Admiral Harrison's smile was not pleasant. "Then, we demonstrate why Earth has never been successfully invaded, not even by its own people. You see, Admiral, you made the same mistake that countless aggressors throughout human history have made. You assumed that because our soldiers don't wear uniforms and Our weapons aren't obviously displayed. We must be defenseless. Sarah Chin's voice joined the conversation from her command bunker. Every human on this planet has been trained from childhood in military tactics and weapon systems. Our entire civilization is built around the principle of citizen soldiers. We don't have a separate military class because every one of us is military. Marcus Johnson looked up from his targeting display to add his perspective. The Empire's intelligence was correct about one thing. We do have strict codes of conduct regarding warfare. But those codes are designed to prevent us from destroying ourselves. They don't apply to external threats. Around the Kytherian fleet, the full scope of Earth's deception was becoming clear. What had appeared to be a primitive world with obvious military targets had revealed itself as perhaps the most heavily fortified system in this part of the galaxy. Every assumption the Empire had made about human capabilities had been deliberately cultivated to lure them into an impossible tactical situation. Sir, Captain Vorth reported, long-range scanners are detecting additional ships moving in from the outer system. They appear to be converging on our position. How many ships? Zexhai asked, though he dreaded the answer. Impossible to determine exactly, sir. They're using some kind of stealth technology we've never encountered. But initial estimates suggest several thousand vessels. Admiral Zexhai realized that the Kytherian Empire had stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple planetary conquest. They had discovered a civilization that had not only hidden its true capabilities, but had specifically prepared to face them. The humans had turned the Empire's own tactical doctrine against them. And now the Third Fleet was trapped in a system where every inhabitant was a potential enemy combatant, and every surface might hide advanced weapons. Admiral Harrison, Zexhai said, his voice carrying the weight of dawning understanding. How long has Earth been preparing for this encounter? The human admiral's expression grew thoughtful. In one sense, we've been preparing for over 200 years, ever since we detected the first signs of the Empire's expansion. But, in a larger sense, we've been preparing for this kind of fight for our entire history. You see, Admiral, humans have always understood that the greatest military advantage belongs to those who can remain invisible until the moment they choose to strike. Dr. Warren leaned forward in her laboratory, her academic demeanor unchanged despite the circumstances. The Empire's greatest weakness has always been its assumption that advanced civilizations will organize themselves along the same lines you do. Obvious military hierarchies, clearly marked installations, predictable tactical responses. You've never learned to fight an enemy that doesn't follow your rules. Admiral Zexhai looked around his command bridge, seeing his crew's faces reflecting the same growing realization he felt. The Kytherian Empire, for all its technological superiority and military experience, had never encountered an enemy like humanity. They had never fought a species that treated warfare as a fundamental part of citizenship, where every individual was both civilian and soldier, where the entire society could transform from peaceful to military without any visible preparation. The Admiral realized that Earth had not just defended itself successfully, they had demonstrated that everything the Empire thought they knew about warfare was incomplete. The humans had found a way to be simultaneously peaceful and militaristic, civilian and military, primitive and advanced. They had achieved something the Empire had never imagined possible. A perfect tactical surprise on a planetary scale. What happens now? Admiral Zexhai asked, knowing that his next decision would determine not just the fate of his fleet, but possibly the future of the Empire itself. Admiral Harrison's response to Zexhai's question came not in words, but in demonstration. Across the Sol system, Earth's true defensive capabilities began revealing themselves with systematic precision that made the Admiral realize just how thoroughly the Empire had been outmaneuvered. The demonstration began small. A single asteroid, one that Kytherian sensors had catalogued as ordinary space debris, suddenly accelerated toward the edge of the system. As it moved, layers of camouflaged armor fell away to reveal a spacecraft larger than anything in the Imperial fleet. The vessel's energy signature alone suggested weapon systems that could destroy a Kytherian battleship with a single salvo. That, Admiral Harrison explained conversationally, is the Hidden Strike, one of our older vessels. She's been masquerading as asteroid designation 447 Alpha in your navigation charts for the past 6 months. We have 147 similar craft positioned throughout the system. Captain Vortha's mandibles clicked frantically as he tried to reconcile the sensor readings with everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Sir, the energy output from that single vessel exceeds our entire task force. How is that possible? Dr. Warren appeared on a secondary communication channel from her laboratory. The Empire has always assumed that technological advancement must be visible, she explained, her academic tone contrasting sharply with the military implications of her words. You build larger ships, more obvious weapons, more clearly defined military installations. Humans learned long ago that the most effective weapons are the ones your enemy never sees coming. Sarah Chin's voice joined from her command bunker, where she was coordinating what appeared to be a planet-wide military exercise. We call it the Civilian Defense Protocol. Every human settlement, from major cities to remote agricultural stations, maintains the appearance of normal civilian activity while serving as integrated components of our military infrastructure. The taxi driver in Mumbai, who had revealed himself as Colonel Patel of the Earth Defense Force, was now demonstrating this principle in real time. His seemingly ordinary vehicle had transformed into a mobile command center equipped with communication arrays that connected him to military assets across 3 continents. The beauty of our system, he explained to the increasingly bewildered Kytherian officers, is that we never actually stop being civilians. We just happen to be civilians who are all trained in advanced military tactics, equipped with cutting-edge weapons, and organized into the most effective planetary defense network in known space. Marcus Johnson looked up from his accounting office, which had become indistinguishable from a military command center. The Empire's mistake was assuming that military force has to look military. We learned centuries ago that the most dangerous soldier is the one who looks like everyone else. Admiral Zexhai was beginning to understand the scope of humanity's deception. This wasn't simply a matter of hidden weapons or camouflaged installations. The humans had created an entirely new form of warfare, one based on the principle that an entire civilization could serve as a military force without appearing to be one. Status report on Earth Defense Forces, he ordered his intelligence officer. Sir, the officer replied, his voice strained. We're having difficulty distinguishing between civilian and military personnel. It appears that everyone on the planet has military training and equipment. The street musician in Sao Paulo demonstrated this principle by setting down his guitar and activating what appeared to be personal armor that materialized around him from devices that had been disguised as ordinary street furniture. Within seconds, he had transformed from a harmless entertainer into a heavily armed warrior equipped with weapons that could threaten a Kytherian ground assault team. Sir, Captain Vorth reported with growing alarm, we're detecting energy buildups consistent with planetary defense systems across the entire world. Not just military installations, but residential areas, commercial districts, even agricultural regions. Admiral Harrison's image appeared on the main display, and behind him, Admiral Zexhai could see what was clearly a sophisticated war room filled with humans who looked like they could have been accountants, teachers, or shop clerks just hours earlier. Each of them was now operating military equipment with the efficiency of veteran soldiers. Admiral Zexhai, I think it's time we explained exactly what you've encountered, Harrison said. Earth doesn't have a military in the traditional sense. We are our military. Every human citizen is trained from childhood in combat tactics, weapon systems, and strategic planning. Our entire civilization is organized around the principle of total defense. Dr. Warren leaned forward in her laboratory, which had revealed itself as a research facility that had apparently been developing countermeasures to Empire technology for decades. The concept is called distributed warfare. Instead of concentrating military power in obvious targets that can be identified and neutralized, we distribute it throughout our entire population and infrastructure. Every building, every vehicle, every individual is potentially a military asset. The elderly man feeding pigeons had revealed his bench to be a control station for orbital defense platforms. Now he was demonstrating why age was irrelevant in humanity's military doctrine. His weathered hands moved across controls with the precision of someone who had been preparing for this moment for decades. Ground Station Charlie, to Orbital Command. He spoke into his communication system. Request permission to demonstrate our area denial capabilities to our guests. Sarah Chin's voice responded from her command bunker. Permission granted, Charlie. Show them what happens when they threaten our children. What happened next redefined Admiral Zexhi's understanding of planetary defense systems. Across Earth's surface, seemingly ordinary structures began revealing weapon installations that had been completely invisible to Kytherian sensors. Shopping centers opened hidden bays to deploy anti-ship missiles. Office buildings extended particle beam cannons that had been concealed within their architectural features. Even suburban houses revealed that their backyards contained camouflage defense turrets. But the most shocking revelation was how coordinated it all was. This wasn't a hastily organized resistance or a last-minute militarization of civilian assets. This was a carefully planned and extensively rehearsed defensive strategy that had been in development for decades. Sir, the Kytherian tactical officer reported, his voice barely controlled. Every human settlement is revealing military capabilities. We're reading weapon signatures from installations we never detected. The entire planet appears to be one massive fortress. Colonel Patel's voice came through the communication system from his mobile command post. The Empire has always relied on the assumption that you can tell the difference between soldiers and civilians, between military and civilian targets. We decided long ago that this distinction was a weakness rather than a strength. Marcus Johnson nodded from his office command center. When everyone is a soldier, your enemy can never be certain what they're really facing. When military installations look like civilian buildings, targeting becomes impossible without committing genocide. When your entire population is trained for warfare, conquest becomes occupation of a hostile territory where every individual is a potential threat. Admiral Zexhi realized that humanity had not just hidden their military capabilities, they had invented an entirely new form of warfare that made traditional military doctrine obsolete. The Empire's strategies were all based on identifying and neutralizing obvious military targets. What did you do when the entire civilization was a military target? Admiral Harrison, Zexhi said, this is unprecedented. No civilization in Empire records has ever organized itself in this manner. The human admiral's expression grew thoughtful. That's because most civilizations make the same mistake the Empire has made. They assume that military power and civilian life are separate things. Humans learned long ago that the most effective defense comes from making military capability indistinguishable from normal life. Dr. Warren activated a holographic display that showed the distribution of military assets across Earth. To Admiral Zexhi's amazement, there was no pattern he could recognize. Military capabilities were everywhere, hidden within infrastructure that looked completely civilian. The principle is simple, she explained. Instead of building obvious military targets, we integrate defensive capabilities into the infrastructure of daily life. The grocery store where people buy food also houses a fusion reactor. The school where children learn mathematics also trains them in tactical coordination. The hospital that heals the sick also produces the most advanced combat medical technology in known space. Sarah Chun added from her bunker, "We've been perfecting this system for generations." Every human child grows up understanding that they are both civilian and soldier, that their peaceful daily life and their military readiness are the same thing. The street musician in Sao Paulo was now coordinating orbital strikes while maintaining his position on the corner where he had been playing music. His transformation illustrated the core principle of human military doctrine. The most dangerous enemies are the ones you never see coming. "Sir," Captain Vorth reported, "we're receiving additional communications from the asteroid belt. More vessels are revealing themselves. It appears that what we thought was a mining operation has been an entire fleet in disguise." Admiral Zexhi looked at the tactical display and realized that the Kytherian Empire was facing something they had never encountered before, an enemy that had made warfare invisible. Every assumption about military organization, every tactical doctrine, every strategic principle that had brought the Empire's success across 47 worlds was useless against an opponent who had made their entire civilization into a weapon. "Admiral Harrison," he said finally, "we need to talk." The human admiral's expression didn't change. "I'm listening, Admiral." "But," Understand this. You're not negotiating with a military commander. You're negotiating with representatives of an entire civilization that has spent generations preparing to defend itself against exactly this scenario. Every human in this system has a voice in what happens next, and every one of them is armed with weapons that could destroy your flagship. Admiral Zexhai realized that the Empire had not just encountered a new enemy. They had discovered that everything they thought they knew about warfare was incomplete. Humanity had achieved something that no military strategist in Empire history had imagined possible. They had made peace and war indistinguishable, civilian and military identical, making them simultaneously the most peaceful and most dangerous civilization the Empire had ever encountered. The question now was whether the Empire was capable of adapting to this new reality, or whether their inflexibility would become their downfall. Admiral Zexhai suspected that the answer to that question would determine not just the fate of his fleet, but the future of the Empire itself. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in the Empire's military history. Admiral Zexhai found himself in the unprecedented position of treating with an enemy whose true capabilities remained largely unknown despite having revealed far more than should have been possible. What disturbed him most was the growing realization that Earth's demonstration had been carefully calibrated to show strength without revealing everything. Admiral Harrison established the communication protocols from what appeared to be a conference room that could have belonged to any civilian corporation. The table was surrounded by humans who looked like they represented every possible profession and age group. Only their casual familiarity with the advanced military interfaces revealed that this was actually a war council. "Before we begin," Harrison said, "I want you to understand something about our perspective. The Empire has conquered 47 worlds by following the same basic strategy. Identify the obvious military targets, overwhelm them with superior technology, then negotiate with defeated leadership. That approach will not work here." Dr. Warren, still in her academic clothing but now clearly revealed as something far more dangerous than a university professor, activated a holographic display that showed the expansion of the Kytherian Empire over the past 2 centuries. "We've been monitoring your expansion patterns for quite some time. Your military doctrine is remarkably consistent, which made it relatively easy to prepare countermeasures." Admiral Zexhai studied the display with growing unease. "You've been watching us for 200 years? That's impossible. Our deep space reconnaissance would have detected any advanced observation technology." Sarah Chin's voice came from her bunker, where she was apparently coordinating planetary defenses while simultaneously participating in the negotiations. "Admiral, you're still thinking in terms of traditional military intelligence. We didn't need to send ships or establish observation posts. We learned to read the signs of your expansion from the effects you left behind." Marcus Johnson looked up from his office command center, where he had been monitoring what appeared to be real-time intelligence feeds from across the galaxy. "Refugee populations fleeing ahead of your expansion. Disrupted trade routes. Changes in communication patterns from conquered worlds. The Empire leaves a very distinctive signature across interstellar space." The taxi driver in Mumbai, Colonel Patel, added his perspective from his mobile command post. "We also had help from some of your previous acquisitions. Not all conquered worlds accepted their fate as gracefully as your reports might suggest." This statement hit Admiral Zexhai like a physical blow. "You're in contact with worlds under Empire control." The elderly man at his park bench, now revealed as General Morrison according to his identification tags, smiled grimly. "Admiral, one of the things humans excel at is networking. We've been quietly establishing communication with resistance movements across your entire territory for decades." Admiral Harrison leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "This is what I meant about understanding our perspective. Earth isn't just defending itself from the Empire. We're coordinating with a galaxy-wide resistance movement that you never knew existed." Dr. Warren activated another display, this one showing communication networks that apparently span dozens of star systems under Empire control. "The Empire's greatest weakness has always been your assumption that conquered worlds stay conquered. You establish military governors, extract resources, and assume that local populations will accept their new status. But you've never developed effective methods for detecting or suppressing organized resistance. The street musician in Sao Paulo, now identified as Captain Rodriguez, was demonstrating this principle in real time. His equipment was not just coordinating local defenses, but apparently communicating with similar resistance cells across multiple worlds. "Sir," Captain Vorth reported quietly to Admiral Zexhai, "our communication intercept systems are detecting massive data flows between Earth and everywhere. It appears they're in active communication with installations across the entire Empire." Admiral Zexhai felt the foundations of everything he thought he knew about the Empire's security continuing to crumble. How is this possible? Our communication monitoring systems would detect unauthorized transmissions. Colonel Patel smiled from his taxicab command center. "Only if you know what to look for. Humans have always been excellent at hiding information in plain sight. We've been piggybacking our communications on your own systems for decades." Sarah Chin's voice carried a note of what might have been sympathy. "Admiral, the Empire has been fighting a different war than the one you thought you were winning. While you were conquering worlds, we were building networks. While you were establishing military governors, we were teaching resistance tactics. While you were extracting resources, we were planning your downfall." Admiral Harrison gestured to the people around his conference table. "These aren't just Earth's defenders, Admiral. They're coordinating with resistance movements across 47 worlds. Every conquest the Empire thought it had achieved has actually been infiltrated by human advisors and supplied with Earth technology." The implications of this revelation were staggering. Admiral Zexhai realized that the Empire hadn't just encountered a single defended world. They had stumbled into the headquarters of a galaxy-spanning resistance movement that had been operating under their noses for generations. "This is impossible," he said, but the evidence was mounting on every display around him. The Empire maintains strict communication monitoring on all controlled worlds. Any resistance activities would be detected immediately. Dr. Warren's academic expression turned slightly predatory. "Admiral, you're still thinking like a Kytherian. You look for the obvious signs of resistance: military communications, weapon stockpiles, organized combat units. But humans taught our allies to resist the way we defend ourselves, by making resistance indistinguishable from normal life." Marcus Johnson pulled up a display showing what appeared to be routine commercial communications between Empire worlds. Every trade shipment carries resistance communications. Every civilian transport includes human advisors. Every routine maintenance update for your infrastructure includes instructions for sabotage. The Empire's own logistics network has become our distribution system. General Morrison leaned back in his park bench command chair, looking satisfied. "The beauty of our approach is that it's built into the basic structure of civilization. You can't stop people from communicating, trading, or moving around without destroying the very thing you're trying to control. And humans are very, very good at hiding in plain sight." Admiral Zexhai realized that the situation was far worse than he had imagined. Earth wasn't just a well-defended world. It was the command center of a resistance movement that had apparently converted the entire Empire into a network of potential rebels. "What do you want?" he asked, though he suspected the answer would be far more complex than simple territorial concessions. Admiral Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. "That's an interesting question, Admiral. What we want is very simple. The complete withdrawal of Empire forces from all 47 conquered worlds, recognition of their independence, and reparations for 2 centuries of unauthorized resource extraction." "That's impossible. The Empire would never agree to such terms." Sarah Chin's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "Admiral, I don't think you understand your position. The Empire has been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of what they actually control. Let me show you something." The main display activated to show real-time feeds from across the Empire's territory. But instead of the ordered, controlled worlds that Admiral Zexhai expected, he saw signs of coordination and preparation that looked suspiciously similar to what Earth had just revealed. On Kepler 442b, agricultural workers were revealing hidden weapon caches. On Tau Ceti E, mining operations were powering up defensive systems that had apparently been built into the infrastructure. On Ross 128b, civilian populations were organizing with military precision that suggested extensive training and preparation. "Sir," Captain Vorth whispered, "are we seeing coordinated rebellion across the entire Empire?" Colonel Patel answered from his command post. Not rebellion, Captain. Liberation. Every world the Empire conquered has been preparing for this moment. Earth was never your target. We were your trap. Dr. Warren activated additional displays showing the true scope of the resistance network. The Empire has been systematically infiltrated at every level. Your own supply chains, communication networks, and transportation systems have all been compromised. What you thought was a stable domain was actually a carefully maintained illusion while we prepared for this moment. Admiral Harrison leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. Admiral Zexhai, the Empire is facing a choice. You can recognize the reality of your situation and negotiate an orderly withdrawal from territories you never actually controlled, or you can attempt to maintain your illusions while 48 worlds demonstrate exactly what organized resistance looks like. The street musician in Sao Paulo was now coordinating what appeared to be simultaneous operations across multiple star systems. The thing about networks, Admiral, is that they're much stronger than hierarchies. You can't defeat us by destroying our command centers because we don't have any. You can't cut our supply lines because we are our supply lines. You can't eliminate our leadership because every one of us is leadership. Admiral Zexhai looked around his bridge, seeing his crew's expressions reflecting the same growing realization he felt. The Kytherian Empire had not just failed to conquer Earth. They had discovered that their entire domain was an illusion maintained by an enemy that had been preparing for this moment for generations. Admiral Harrison, he said finally, even if what you're saying is true, the Empire has resources you can't imagine. Our industrial capacity, our military reserves, our technological advantages. General Morrison smiled from his park bench. Admiral, tell me something. Where do those resources come from? Where are your industrial facilities located? What worlds provide your raw materials? Who maintains your supply chains? As the questions sank in, Admiral Zexhai felt the last of his confidence crumbling. Every aspect of the Empire's strength was based on resources extracted from conquered worlds, maintained by populations they thought they controlled, transported through networks they assumed were secure. If Earth was telling the truth about the scope of their resistance movement, then the Empire's greatest strengths had become their greatest weaknesses. Every conquered world was a potential enemy. Every supply chain was a potential vulnerability. Every communication network was a potential weapon turned against them. What happens now? He asked, knowing that his next decision would determine not just the fate of his fleet, but possibly the future of the Empire itself. Admiral Harrison's expression grew sympathetic. Now, Admiral, you get to decide whether the Empire learns to coexist with free worlds, or whether it learns what happens when humans stop pretending to be harmless. Admiral Zexhai's decision came not from strategic calculation, but from the gradual recognition that the empire he had served for over a century no longer existed in any meaningful sense. The realization arrived in pieces as reports flooded in from across the galaxy, each one confirming that humanity's claims about the scope of their resistance network had been, if anything, understated. The first confirmation came from the Empire's core worlds. Captain Vorth received a priority transmission from the Imperial capital itself, his mandibles clicking frantically as he tried to process information that should have been impossible. "Sir," he reported, his voice strained with disbelief, "we're receiving reports from Imperial Command. They're reporting coordinated infrastructure failures across all core systems. Power grids, communication networks, transportation systems. Everything is simultaneously experiencing what they're calling systematic malfunctions." Admiral Harrison's voice came through the communication channel with what sounded like genuine regret. "I'm afraid those aren't malfunctions, Captain. Every major installation in Empire space was built using components and systems that included certain modifications. We've just activated them." Sarah Chun appeared on a secondary channel from her command bunker, where she was apparently coordinating activities across multiple star systems simultaneously. "Admiral, what you're seeing is the activation of protocols we've been installing for decades. Every piece of technology the Empire imported from conquered worlds, every system upgrade performed by local technicians, every maintenance cycle completed by civilian workers, all of it included our modifications." The scope of what the humans were describing began to sink in. Dr. Warren activated a display that showed the Empire's infrastructure network in real time, and Admiral Zexhai watched in horror as system after system showed failures cascading across multiple worlds. "This is impossible," he said, but the evidence was overwhelming. The Empire's security protocols would prevent this level of sabotage. Marcus Johnson looked up from his office command center, where he was apparently managing what looked like the largest coordinated operation in galactic history. "Admiral, your security protocols were designed to prevent obvious threats. They were never intended to stop people from gradually improving the systems they were asked to maintain." Colonel Patel's voice came from his mobile command post, where he was coordinating similar activities with resistance cells across the Empire. "Every human advisor sent to help improve Imperial infrastructure has been installing backdoors and redundancies. Every civilian technician trained by your people has been learning how to disable the systems they were building. Every routine maintenance cycle has been an opportunity to plant additional modifications." The elderly General Morrison activated another display from his park bench command station, showing what appeared to be real-time coordination between Earth and every world in the Empire. "The beautiful thing about infrastructure is that it has to be maintained by local populations. And local populations can be very creative about how they interpret their maintenance responsibilities." Admiral Zexhai realized that the Empire's greatest strength, their ability to efficiently manage resources and infrastructure across multiple worlds, had been turned against them. Every conquered world had become a vulnerability. Every civilian worker had become a potential saboteur. Every piece of imported technology had become a weapon. "Status report." He ordered his communications officer. "Sir, we're receiving priority transmissions from across the Empire. Fleet Command reports that 60% of their vessels are experiencing power failures. Resource Command reports that extraction operations have ceased on 34 worlds. Infrastructure Command reports that, sir, they report that they have no reliable communication with any conquered territory." The street musician in Sao Paulo, Captain Rodriguez, was now coordinating what appeared to be the systematic shutdown of Imperial operations across the galaxy. "The thing about networks, Admiral, is that once you're part of them, it's very difficult to operate without them. The Empire has become completely dependent on infrastructure maintained by the people they conquered." Admiral Harrison's expression grew more serious. "Admiral Zexhai, what you're witnessing is not an invasion or a rebellion. It's a revelation. The Empire has been operating under the illusion that they controlled territory and populations. What they actually controlled was a carefully maintained facade, while the real power structures developed underneath their notice." Dr. Warren leaned forward in her laboratory, which was apparently serving as a coordination center for scientific installations across dozens of worlds. The Empire's fundamental error was assuming that technological superiority equals control. But technology requires maintenance, resources require extraction, and populations require management. All of those things require cooperation from local populations. Sarah Chin added from her bunker, "What we did was convince local populations to cooperate with building a different system entirely. One that looked like Imperial infrastructure, but actually served our purposes." Admiral Zexhai watched the tactical displays around him as the scope of humanity's achievement became clear. This wasn't just successful resistance to Imperial expansion. It was the systematic conversion of the entire Empire into a network controlled by Earth. "How long?" he asked. "How long has this been developing?" General Morrison smiled from his command bench. "Admiral, we've been working on this project since the first human advisors were sent to help improve Imperial efficiency 40 years ago. Every suggestion we made, every improvement we recommended, every innovation we introduced was designed to gradually transfer real control to local populations while maintaining the appearance of Imperial authority." Marcus Johnson pulled up historical data showing the gradual transformation of Imperial infrastructure over 4 decades. "The Empire was very pleased with our contributions. Imperial efficiency increased dramatically, resource extraction became more profitable, and conquered populations seemed more cooperative. What your analysts didn't realize was that we were building a completely different system underneath their existing one." Colonel Patel demonstrated this principle by showing how his apparently routine taxi operations in Mumbai had actually been coordinating resistance activities across multiple star systems. The Empire never learned to distinguish between cooperation and preparation. They saw improved efficiency and assumed it meant acceptance of imperial authority. Admiral Zexhai realized that the humans had achieved something that should have been impossible. They had conquered the Empire from within while making it stronger and more efficient. Every imperial victory had actually been a step toward their ultimate defeat. "Sir," Captain Vorth reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Imperial Command. They're requesting our immediate return to defend core systems." Admiral Harrison's expression grew sympathetic. "Admiral, your core systems are in no danger. What's happening is a peaceful transfer of authority. Local populations are simply beginning to operate the infrastructure they've been maintaining according to their own priorities instead of imperial directives. This is impossible. The Empire has military reserves, loyal populations, secure installations." Dr. Warren activated a display showing military installations across the Empire. "Admiral, where do you think those military reserves get their equipment? Who maintains their secure installations? Who provides their supplies and communications?" As the implications sank in, Admiral Zexhai realized that the Empire's military power was as illusory as their territorial control. Every base, every ship, every weapon system was dependent on infrastructure maintained by populations that had apparently been working for Earth all along. Sarah Chin's voice carried a note of genuine sympathy. "Admiral, this doesn't have to be traumatic. What we're offering is a transition to a system where worlds govern themselves, trade with each other freely, and cooperate on mutual defense. The Empire's administrative efficiency can be maintained. It will just be serving different goals." Admiral Harrison leaned forward. "The choice is simple, Admiral. You can recognize the new reality and help facilitate a peaceful transition, or you can attempt to maintain imperial authority by force against populations who control all the infrastructure you depend on." General Morrison added from his bench, "I should point out that attempting to use force would require supplies, communications, and transportation systems that are all controlled by the people you'd be fighting." Admiral Zexhai looked around his bridge, seeing his crew's expressions reflecting his own dawning understanding. The Kytherian Empire hadn't just lost a battle or failed to conquer Earth. They had discovered that their entire domain had been quietly transferred to enemy control over the course of decades, while they remained completely unaware of what was happening. "What do you want from us?" he asked finally. Admiral Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. "What we want is very simple, Admiral. We want you to go home and help your people understand that the galaxy has changed. The age of conquest is over. What's beginning is an age of cooperation between free worlds." Marcus Johnson looked up from his coordination displays. "Earth will be happy to maintain trade relationships with Kytherian core worlds. We'll continue providing technological assistance and resource exchanges. The only thing that changes is that conquered worlds become partner worlds." Colonel Patel added, "The Empire's expertise in logistics and administration is valuable. We just want it used to help worlds develop their own capabilities rather than extract resources for Imperial use." Dr. Warren activated a final display showing proposed trade and cooperation agreements between Earth, the liberated worlds, and the Kytherian core systems. "What we're offering is essentially the same relationship the Empire had, but based on mutual benefit rather than domination." Admiral Zexhai realized that humanity had not just defeated the Empire. They had offered them a way to maintain most of their power and prosperity while abandoning the conquest-based expansion that had brought them into conflict. It was perhaps the most elegant victory in galactic history. "Admiral Harrison," he said finally, "I think I understand why 47 worlds chose cooperation over resistance. It wasn't because they were defeated. It was because you gave them something better." The human admiral smiled. "Admiral, humans learned long ago that the most effective victory is the one where your former enemies become your allies. What we offer the Empire is not defeat, but partnership in building something better than conquest." As Admiral Zexhai prepared to return to Kytherian space with news that would transform the Empire forever, he reflected on the lesson Earth had taught them. The galaxy's most dangerous soldiers had been hiding in plain sight all along, not because they were masters of camouflage, but because they had redefined what it meant to be a soldier entirely. They had proven that the deadliest warriors were not those who looked most dangerous, but those who could build something worth defending while appearing completely harmless. And, in the process, they had given the galaxy a new model for what civilization could become.